Welcome to My Life, Tanya Applied, with Rabbi Simon Jacobson, a journey into the deepest teachings of Torah and their application to our personal, emotional, and psychological lives.
A good tavach, a good week. We continue our journey in the life-changing Sefer HaTanya. This program is made possible by Rena Lights LLC and is dedicated in honor and a loving memory of Rab Shmuel Yosef Littman Plotkin, son of Hagon of Avram Eliyahu Plotkin, who actually is responsible in his merit. This very program on Tanya every week was generated and initiated several years ago. It's also in schus of Rav Zev Yecheskel HaKoyen and Risha Katz Le'erich Yomim V'Shonim Tevis for many long, healthy years. So we are in Perek Chof Tes, chapter 29 of Tanya. Being that this week is the 165th birthday of the 5th Chabad Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab, I'd like to say a few words about that, and then we'll resume where we left off in Tanya. So Rebbe Rashab, as I mentioned, Rab Shalom Beiber, son of the Rebbe Marash, who in turn was the son of the Tzemach Tzedek, is the 5th Chabad Rebbe. Was born in the year Chof Cheshvan, the year Tofresh Chof Aleph, and was nostalgic. His Yom Hilula, his Yom Stalkus is on Beis Nisan Tofresh Pei. He assumed leadership in Tofresh Mem Gimel after the Stalkus of the Rebbe Marash, even though formally he didn't really fully accept it until 10 years later. The Rebbe Rashab left us, of course, a body of Chassidus, including explanations in Tanya, in a whole different level of harchova and expansion, to the point that the Rabbeim Chassidim call the Rebbe Rashab the Rambam of Chassidus, like the Rambam who organized all of Shas and Kol HaTeira Kula, actually, in a very structured way, sugyas, in the Yad HaChazakah. The Rebbe Rashab did similarly with Chassidus. And especially you see that in his two grand Hamshechim, Hamshech Tofrei Samach Vov and Hamshech Hayim Beis, even more so. As a matter of fact, I've just finished 13 years of teaching Ayin Beis, which we began at the centennial Tov Shin Ayin Beis, and we just concluded last month. And with that, I should like to also announce that we're going to begin Chof Cheshvan this coming Tuesday. We're going to begin learning Hemshech Samach Vov. If you want to join us, it's a live morning class every day, every weekday, 9:30 a.m. New York time, till 10:30. On Sundays, it begins at 10 a.m. until around 11:30. If you go to samachvov.com, you can see all the details, which is all part of chassidusapplied.com, to participate either live on Zoom and YouTube live, but it's also, of course, archived, so you can listen anytime at your leisure, to your convenience. Going back to the Rebbe Rashab, so the Rebbe Rashab, in the chain of all the Rabbeim, Chabad Rabbeim, continues the evolution, continues the development of Chassidus, but as I said, organized in a way with an expansion that really allows us to understand the scope and the breadth of the comprehensive blueprint, which is Chassidus, Pnimis HaTeira, allowing us to apply it to our lives as a living Torah of Korev Elecha Dover Me'ed B'Fichel B'Vovchel HaSeisei, as the Alter Rebbe writes in the Sharblat of Tanya. And in that context, the Rebbe Rashab adds into the whole appreciation of being able to take these ideas of Chassidus Chabad from the Alter Rebbe all the way through all the Rabbeim till the Rebbe Rashab, and turn it into, as I said, a very comprehensive blueprint. Essentially, as the Rebbe Rashab explains in Ayin Beis and in Samach Vov and other Maimorim, it's all about Seder Shtalshus, which Hashem gave us an interface, a mamutza, for us to be able to connect with Him. Hashem didn't just want us to fulfill His mitzvahs, which you can do ma'aseh b'peil, like an eved, a servant, can fulfill the commandments of the master without having a relationship with Him. He doesn't have to love Him, he doesn't have to understand Him. But the Eibishter said the mitzvah of Yadaita Yayim Vashavesa Levavecha Ki Hashem Hu Elikim B'Shamayim Mal V'Al Oretz Mitochas Einoid Das Elikei Avicha V'Avdua B'Lev of Shalom. The mitzvah of Ahavtas Hashem Elikecha. It's Hashem Elikecha Tira. So you see, these are mitzvahs, not just mitzvahs maisis, action. Hashem wants a relationship, that we should understand God. And we should experience Him emotionally, feel Him, love Him. And for that, it's more than just, as I said, action. Even though Amaiso Iker, it's a relationship. So the Rebbe Rashab, what stands out is how he takes Chassidus and shows us how to build that relationship. Step by step. Think of it like stepping stones, like a ladder, connecting heaven and earth. Sulam Mutzavartz V'Reisha Magia Shamayim. So all of Chassidus does that. The Alter Rebbe began doing that. All of Torah does that, for that matter. But how to do it? In a step-by-step process, you find, especially in the Hemsheichim of the Rebbe Rashab, in Samach Vov, the emphasis is primarily the Aveda, the effort that we make, the initiative from below, down below, and we reach the deepest levels in Elikus, because that's what Nesava Kodesh Baruch Hu, God desired to have a Dirbe Tachtenim. In Ayim Bezi takes it even further level, that there's a Mamayla Lamata, a Mamata Lamayla, that you do this. Mamat Lamayla is the Aveda from B'Koyach Atzmei. But then Torah is given to us an ability to bring down the highest levels of Elikus down below. As he explained at length in Ayim Beis, that there's two interpretations in when we say Aramimcha Elikei HaMelech. So we say that Aramimcha Elikei HaMelech we could teach, we say in Ashrei, Mamata Lamayla, that Aramimcha we elevate, we exalt Elikei HaMelech, the Elikus that exists within, that manifests within existence, we exalt to the level of Keser, to a level of Aramimcha Rememus, transcendence. And then there's Mamayla Lamata, that you mamshich Aramimcha into Elikei HaMelech. And he elaborates at length the difference between Torah and Tefillah. But the full union, the full Shutaf LaKadosh Baruch Hu B'Maaseh Bereishis, the full partnership is dafke when you have both elements. Like the famous Moshel Chassidus, like when you have someone standing on top of a mountain, someone below, there's two ways for them to connect. Either the one above comes down or the one below goes up. But the best is when they have both meeting each other. The Rebbe Rashab captures that, especially in Ayim Beis, with the theme of Keser. That's Keser. The level of Keser is the Mamutza. And it's interesting to note that the Rebbe Rashab was born Chof Cheshvan, the year Kisra, the Tzemach Tzedek emphasizes. So in Aramaic, Kis Tofresh Chof Aleph is Keser with an Aleph. Kisra is Tofresh Chof Aleph. And on Chof Cheshvan, Chof is Rosh Tevis and Gematria Esrim and Rosh Tevis Keser. So you see it in the very date of the Rebbe Rashab's birth. And his name, Sholem Dov Ber, you also have Sholem is, of course, to bring a Sholem b'Pamali Shalmaila, Sholem b'Pamali Shalmata. But the Sholem has to be Nimshach in Dov Ber. Dov Ber, Rashab, is the acronym, and as the Rebbe Fried Tzemach Tzedek as well said, Rashab is Bosar, that in the very flesh of this world. A Dov and Ber is in Yiddish and in Hebrew. A Dov is Mesurbal b'Bosar. It's thick, flesh. So in the world of flesh, in a world of Tachtenim, to be Mamshech the Shalom of Elikus and the Shalom of Torah through our Avedus Hashem. So in the Rebbe's name, in the Rebbe Rashab's name, you see hinted both in his name and his birth, and many other elements that you see in the Rebbe Rashab's life. Keep in mind also that Rebbe Rashab lived in a very difficult transitionary time, going from Tsarist Russia with the Russian Revolution, going into the world of Bolsheviks and communism. Rebbe Rashab lived all through that and prepared his chassidim, his students, by establishing the yeshiva Temchet Mimim Tofresh Nun Zayin. Like he said, it's not just another yeshiva to learn Torah. That we have many good yeshivas, but it's a yeshiva that will train them to be soldiers, spiritual soldiers. Hayetzel Melchemes Beis David. And what's the spiritual war? Against those that challenge godliness and those that challenge Mashiach. Charfu ikvis Hashem, chachvu ikvis Mashiachecha. To train a generation that will be able to not just play defense, but to go on the offense, to transform the very world that was entering the modern age of the 20th century. You might see prophecy in that sense, but the Rebbe Rashab foresaw This is all before World War I. They foresaw the events that would take place, the upheavals, and ultimately train a yeshiva that would be trained in Nigla Torah and Pnimis Torah, empowered with the resources and tools to be able to go into an assimilated world, a difficult world, a corrupt world, a world hostile in many ways to godliness, and not just be able to survive, but to be able to transform it into a dire b'tachtenim, into a place of Torah and mitzvahs, Torah and tefillah, as we've seen both in the United States and all around the world. So those are a few words about the Rebbe Rashab, and of course the lessons to us that we take from the Rebbe Rashab in our personal lives on the day of his birthday, Mazoli Gever, to be able to implement this, and the training that Rebbe Rashab gave us all, because by extension the yeshiva today all is extended from the yeshiva that he established, Hemchet Mimim, and may we fulfill our part in this mission of Yefutza Ma'anesecha Chutza, bringing the wellsprings of Chassidus and Pnimis Torah, the Baal Shem Tov Chutza, to the farthest outskirts, to the Chutza She'en Chutz Mimeno, and that's what Mashiach, as Mashiach told the Baal Shem Tov, that will cause the Kosimar do Malka Mashiach, the coming arrival of Mashiach B'Korav Mamash. And we've been told that we're already at the threshold. We just have one more drop to do to tip the scale. And with that, let us move right into the Torah Shebiksav of Chassidus Tanya. We're up to chapter 29, and we're discussing the very nature of a human being. As I said, when you look at Tanya and you look at this, the development of the ideas, the Alter Rebbe is giving us a comprehensive blueprint of how to deal with the biggest enemy of all, the enemy within, the Nefesh Habamis, which was given to us precisely to challenge us, for us to be able to overcome its challenge and create within our own beings, our own psyches, a life that's aligned with what Hashem wants. But it doesn't come easy, because there is a battle. So the earlier chapters, the Alter Rebbe spoke about the battle and how to overcome the battle. What we're discussing now is when a person feels the real blockages and the impediments. And we all have this, what he calls Timtum Halev. Touches also alludes to Timtum HaMoyach, but Timtum Halev, Timtum is like a blockage, an insensitivity, where even when you do all the work, and you daven and you learn, there's something about us that is being held hostage in a way, and trapped in this material world. Just on the very basic level, as we'll soon talk about more in detail. What comes natural to us in this world is materialism. You wake up in the morning, you know immediately if you're hungry or tired, or hungry, thirsty, tired. You don't need to look in a Shulchan Aruch, you don't need to be reminded. When it comes to Ruchnius, we need work. And the Eibishter made it that way. Famous line, it's a story, or famous expression from the Rebbe Yitzchak Bar Ditchever. He turned to Hashem in one of his classic Limudei Schus, finding merit in the Jewish people, and he said, Akunz, a trick you made. What did you do? You gave them, the Jewish people. You gave them Elam Hazeh to experience. And you wrote about Elam Haba, meaning the spiritual worlds, in books and Sfarim. We have to learn about it in Sfarim. Try doing the other way around. Let them experience Ruchnis. And write in the books about Gashmis, about materialism. And you'll see how they behave. In other words, you gave us what you gave us that is tangible reality, that comes natural to us, is Gashmis. But the intention is, that's the challenge. The intention is to not allow ourselves to be seduced by that, and come to discover that the divine soul, the Nefesh Elikis, should be the dominant force in our lives. But the problem is, it's not just a matter of strengthening the Nefesh Elikis through Tefillah and Torah and all that we've learned, and Moyach Shal Talev and the Hizbonenus and the contemplation, whatever level of Ava and Yiru you can achieve, love and reverence. And not only that, we have the Ava Misuteres that everyone has, and essentially an innate love to godliness. We have another problem. We are trapped in this world. There's a timtum involved. When it comes to things that are Gashmias, people naturally gravitate to them. Ruchnius has a block. There's a mental block, there's a psychological block, an emotional block. Even people who are spiritual, by nature, wired that way. Not easy. And especially you have the daigas of this world, parnasa, livelihood, health, all the distractions. And everybody could apply and fill in the blanks way appropriate to your life. So what do you do with this intense blockage? It's like you're talking to someone, and they hear you, but something still blocks. It doesn't seem to penetrate. So the Alter Rebbe brings a Zayar. It says, Eitzi Utza. The Zayar advises us. And what's the advice? Think of it like a piece of wood that fire cannot penetrate fully for the wood to catch. So you have to do is strike the wood. Crush the wood. Because it's too thick. But as we discussed, and with all the disclaimers and qualifications, this doesn't mean, God forbid, to destroy Gashmis, because the Alter Baal Shem Tov Beferish teaches us, Ozev Tazev Imeh, you have to work with the Gashmis. But you have to all understand it's still Kisiris Chamer Senacha. It's still Senacha. Because the body does pose a challenge. It is your enemy. The goal is not to kill the enemy, not to destroy the enemy, weaken the enemy, and ultimately transform it. So after all the eitzes we've had till here, how we use the nefesh elikis, and all the negative thoughts we may have, we understand is all coming from the animal soul. And you have to overcome it and think in the positive, and think that the challenges themselves are part of the divine plan. Every tchiyah, every act of restraint and refrain reaches the deepest levels in elikus. But then there's one last step, and that is you have to put into its place. You have to it's like when you speak to yourself in a way where you realize you're procrastinating, or there are other forces that are not allowing you to really move forward. Sometimes you have to actually reprimand yourself. But again, reprimand only the negative element of it. Not to knock yourself, not to criticize. We're not talking about self-affliction in any, God forbid, way. It's all a positive thing to get the fire to catch. So you see that how Gashmis holds on to you. So even though Chassidus emphasized not like Musar, Gadlus Habeira, or Gadlus Remus Hakel, not Shiflus Ha'adam. This is a critical piece to understand. Chassidus focuses on the greatness of your soul. Like I remember a number of times the Rebbe saying in a you meet someone who's le'esata, whatever reason, atinik shenish, but they did not yet appreciate what Torah mitzvahs is. So you have two ways you could speak to them. You could tell them, if you keep on doing sins, you'll be punished and you'll burn in Gehenna, and so on. And look how lowly you are. See what kind of impact that will have. Or you could tell them, you have such a beautiful neshama. Hashem put you in this world for a purpose. Are you living up to your purpose? In other words, elevate them, motivate them. And I remember the Rebbe saying, see, Even HaBeichen, litmus test, which works. The proof is in the pudding, as we say. But the fact of the matter is, the Gashmis of the person is blocking an impediment. So in addition to this positive attitude of the focus on the light, on the neshama, you do have to put the body in place. You have to realize, don't minimize it. It's true the approach is always Yamin Mekareves, in a positive way, in a loving way, but at certain times, as Alter Rebbe said, the itim, the words that he used was, that at certain times, l'kvoye itim lahashpil atzmei. Not all the time. There's certain times you have to simply say, materialism is a real trap. Because awareness is half the cure. You need to know when you're looking at a smartphone and you're addicted to it, you can't just say, you know what, I have a neshama, I'm going to ignore that. No, at times you have to say, yeah, it's trapping you. And you say it not in a way to destroy, you're saying in a way to motivate. And that's what the Alter Rebbe is focusing, because here he's dealing with a blockage that even after Nefesh Elikis has done all its work, and you've davened and learned, you still have that. So you have to weaken the resistance of the material hold in our lives. So this is not to be confused with sigufim and tinius, fasting and self-affliction and self-punishment that some people did in earlier generations. Some, not everybody. The Baal Shem Tov ruled that out, and the Alter Rebbe emphasizes that. However, that doesn't mean that we just ignore. At times you have to recognize, this Gashmis can be very grub, very crass, and very callous, and it's part of who you are. So what we learned is that it's not just a sideshow, it actually becomes part of who you are. you have become a Gashmizdika person. The neshama is taka, pure neshama. Neshama shenasata be, as the Alter Rebbe himself brings. But it's shenasata be. That means the be is what? You are primarily, the nefesh habam is he ha'adam, as he said. That the very person is what? He ha'adam atzmei. We're talking about the sitra achra of the nefesh habamis. And neshama nesata be, b'klal sha'adam atzmei eina neshama tahira. That means you are not the pure soul. So there's an expression from the Alter Rebbe, which really captures this well. He says a person has to know, and this is what Chassidus does, how small they are and how great they can become. Very critical point. Some people know how small they are. They knock themselves, self-critique, self-loathing. Now, Friedrich Rebbe said the person shouldn't speak Lashon Hara on themselves. Just like you know your own chesronos, you have to know your own milas also. However, you still have to know where you stand. So that's why you need to know how small you are. But not that alone. You have to also know how great you can become. Yet you do have a neshama shenasata be. You have a great neshama. You have great potential. But anything, like how do you teach anyone art, music? So you show them what the greats have done, the classics, to show what's possible. They may never reach there, but you need to know what's the standard, what's the highest standard. On the other hand, you can't have the illusions of grandeur. So you have to know where you are. You have to know where you stand. So you need both. You need to know where you are and where you should be going, where you're headed to. And these two combine to motivate you to grow. So how great we are, we've learned the Chelik Elekam Mal Mamish, we learned in the earlier chapters. We're now discussing where you are, where you stand. Not just what you're capable of becoming, where you stand. To understand, because if you don't know where you stand, how do you know? Maybe you're there already. You could delude yourself that you're far more advanced. It's important to know that you're at this level, next level. And that's how the Alter Rebbe now develops this further. And here he explains, that's why a Beinani, and definitely a Rasha, what is the Nefesh Habamis is the primary definition of the person in actuality, on a conscious level. But Etzem, obviously we have Ava Mesuteres, Etzem HaNeshama, Chelik Elikam Mal Mamish, as we learned earlier. By tzadikim shebehem hula hepech. By tzadikim is the opposite. Shaneshama te'ere shenefesh elikis hu ha'adam. The divine soul, that's the person. Now, why is the Alter Rebbe bringing this if we're not tzadikim? Again, for the same reason, to understand where we stand. By tzadikim, they don't have that wood that's resistant, because they've already broken the resistance. There's no longer yetzer hara, like it continues. V'gufam nikra basar adam. The goof is like an add-on, is like a glove, if you wish, a garment. And like Hillel HaZaken said, reviewing what we've learned, the commandment Hillel HaZaken the Talmidov to his students, when he went to eat, he said that when he went to eat, he would say that he's going to perform an act of kindness to a poor, miserable creature, which is his body, referring to his body. Because for him, the body was the stranger. For us, the material is close to us. We relate to it. And the neshama, I don't want to use the word stranger, is the so-called novelty. Like they say, are you a physical human being having a spiritual experience, or are you a spiritual being having a physical experience? So the truth is, we're really spiritual creatures having a physical experience. But in our conscious level, we're physical beings that have an awareness of a neshama within us. But by the tzaddik is the opposite. That's why he's saying he's doing kindness to this poor, miserable creature. Because he himself is only the nefesh elikis. But you have to do chesed with the force. The nefesh elikis was placed inside a body, and you ultimately have to take care of your body. But if you're taking care of it, because the self is identified exclusively with his divine soul. Because when you're talking about the tzaddik, Hilavade, the nefesh alikis, is what energizes, his body and flesh, chai gufe v'zadi, is energized by the neshama, by the nefesh alikis. Because the evil, which was in the animal soul, which was dressed and manifest in the flesh and blood, has been transformed to good. And has been transformed and completely absorbed into the divine soul's holiness. So now you have the contrast. So taka by him, he doesn't have to do this. He doesn't have the resistance of this block of wood the fire doesn't catch the light on the fire of the neshama. Avol bebeinani, but by the beinani, as we learned, being that the deep core of the mehusa asmushal nefesh, the deep core of his nefesh hachayunis, of his animal soul, nefesh hachayunis habahamis shemisit rachar, that comes from the other side, hamelubeshes bedamay upsade, that manifests in his blood and flesh, loy nepach l'teiv. Unlike the tzaddik, this was not transformed to good. So he has two forces at work. He has a soul that has entered neshama shenesat b'teheri, but it's not lepach l'teiv. Harihi ha'odam atzmei. So that nefesh habamis, that is the very identity of the person. V'im kain hu rochik mashem betachlis harichuk, and therefore his very being and identity is far from God as can be. Because of this, to really make the case how bad it can get, because the power of desire, the appetite of the animal soul, can also desire, because it's not been transformed, it's fully capable of craving for things forbidden. That violate God's will. Even though he doesn't desire to actually do them, God forbid. However, he's still capable of desiring them. Rather, it's just that he doesn't find them utterly repulsive like a tzaddik does. As we explained above, as we learned earlier in chapter 12 of Tanya. So as a result of that, his identity identifies very directly with the materialism of this world. And you need to know that. You need to know that aspect, how small you actually can be or are in this material world. We should never think that neshama comes down below. Don't convince yourself, you know what, my life is good, I'm comfortable, I'm happy, I have money, I have material possessions. No, you have to know this material world defines you, it's holding you hostage. Even when you're feeling good, you don't have to wait for something negative to happen. And then he continues more on this, all to come to explain why we need that attitude of being aware and putting yourself in your place, recognizing that you have that block. And that's how you begin to allow the penetration once you start breaking down and striking the wood, or in this case, the insensitive body that's not allowing the soul to fully manifest. And we'll stop here. Everyone have a good tavoch. TanyaApplied.com, chassidusapplied.com is where you can find all the previous programs. Be well, and kol tov.
This has been My Life, Tanya Applied with Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Please join us again next week. Visit chassidusapplied.com for archived classes and more resources.